Okay, perfect. So, welcome to our herbs class. I am excited for this class. I just went to J&J the other day and got some herbs for our garden. And I'm excited to try them. I've never grown herbs myself. I've seen them growing and I helped plant them, but I've never taken care of them and things. So I'm really excited to kind of see how they work and how they are. But it was also really awesome to prepare this PowerPoint to kind of get ready for myself to be taking care of herbs. Awesome. Let's see. This will go. There we go. Okay. So first thing is
Hattie, and really quick, it's kind of showing a presenter mode with with two screens. So you might want to shift your presentation mode.
How do I? Is that better?
There you go. Yep, that did it.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So the first thing with herbs, just kind of interesting stuff, is defining it. So technically, when you say an herb, the botany definition is any seed-bearing plant that doesn't have a woody stem and dies back to the ground at the end of its life. So this is meaning all of your perennials and things, technically, right, would be an herb. So your trees and your annuals would be out. The annuals would be out because they don't come back year after year. And so technically with the botany definition, that's what an herb is. But when we're talking about these kind of things, a culinary view, I guess, the herb would be any plant with leaves, seeds, roots, or flowers that are used for perfume, medicine, and food. So it's like a bundle of herbs, right? And fun fact is that herbs are classified as the leaf part of the plant, usually used in cooking, whereas any other part of the plant, which is usually dried, is referred to as a spice. So, for example, cinnamon it's not the leaves of the plant, so that's considered a spice, or ginger, it's from the root, and so those types of things are spices in culinary terms.
Hey, Hattie,
so yeah.
Let me just cut in really quick. There's already a question about the webinar recording or getting a copy. I failed to mention that almost every time. The webinar will be recorded for everybody. It'll be posted on our website. We don't send out a copy of that to you as an attendee or anything like that. But the webinar is recorded, so you can come back and reference just slides if you want, or watch the entire recording later. Sorry to interrupt there, Hattie, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
Yeah, no, you're good. Thanks. So why should you grow herbs? I mean, we have herbs in the store, right? We have all the dried stuff and all the ground stuff that you can get in the bottles. But there's actually a lot of reasons why you should grow them. There are some health benefits to growing herbs. I mean, having the herbs and spices and things in your bottled up and things, you still get some of the health benefits, but actually having the fresh herbs is really it does a lot of things for you. There's a lot of for example, I was reading today about ginger. Ginger helps with inflammation, so it can help people with arthritis. So there's just a lot of those type of things with herbs that kind of help in a medicinal way, that are really nice. And I included a couple of websites that I found when I was researching about herbs on there, and those stated a lot of really cool things that herbs can actually do for you health-wise. Another reason is the cost benefit. So for example, you can get a $3 basil plant at the store, or you could get a bunch of fresh basil for $3. The bunch is only going to last you for a little bit, whereas the plant, you're going to be picking basil on that throughout the entire summer. Or even I went to J&J and got these herbs, and this little, actually I can show you, let me bring them closer. know if you'll be able to see my little video, but this is the little herb that I got. This is a basil plant, and it was like $1.79, I think. And I mean, that's going to grow really tall and big and bushy, and we're going to have basil throughout the entire summer. And then there's also a taste benefit. It's definitely different having fresh herbs versus the either like the ground up and powdered stuff or even stuff that you buy from the store. One thing that I'm trying this year, because I've heard it's with cilantro, is that cilantro, when you buy it at the store, it starts getting kind of like a soapy taste because the longer it sits, the longer it kind of gets this soapy taste. But if you do it fresh, it tastes a lot different. And I'm not a big fan of cilantro, so I'm excited to see if that'll actually be true. So there's more benefits than just the fun of having like your own herb garden. There's a lot of other benefits to having it. So next thing is choosing a spot for your herbs. Most herbs like full sun. This is meaning 6+ hours of sunlight. Dave and I were actually talking about this today, that cilantro sometimes prefers a little bit more shade. If it gets too stressed with the heat, it tends to go to seed a lot faster. And you can actually use the seeds on cilantro. It's coriander, which is a spice, but you want to be able to use the leaves and things too still. So maybe having a little less sunlight for your cilantro might be a good idea. But most herbs do like to be in full sun. Another thing is you want to make sure they have good drainage. Herbs don't like their roots to be wet all the time. They do need water, right? Especially while they're kind of starting to establish, but especially if you're buying them in like the little packs, usually they have enough of a root system that they don't need like a ton of water on them all the time. If you're doing them from seed, that's when you're going to need to have a little bit more water when it's germinating and things. And then also, it's a good idea to think about where you're going to place your herb garden in relation to your kitchen. If your herb garden is way across your entire yard by your back fence and you have to walk through everything to be able to get fresh herbs, it might just be easier to reach into the counter and get just like the ground up stuff. So having it close to your kitchen is going to be something that you want to keep in mind when choosing where to plant your herb garden. So next is a little bit of design. So there's herb gardens in containers are actually really popular. We have ours in raised beds. They're not really containers. Well, I guess we have a couple of containers that we've put stuff in. And some of the herbs, actually, it's a really good idea to have them in containers. So like, especially the herbs that kind of can go crazy. So your mints or your oreganos, sometimes having those in a container on its own is a little bit better because those tend to kind of take off and take over areas. So if they're in their own pot, you can kind of contain them a little bit easier. So when growing herbs in containers, clay pots are best, and that's because like the air is able to move through the pot a lot better. It has like really good qualities that makes it dry out a little bit faster. And you do want the pot to be at least 10 inches in diameter and depth. So just for relation, here we go. So 10 inches about there. So that's the diameter and then even the depth that you're wanting it to be at. Just because, I mean, your herbs are going to grow and you want to make sure that they have enough room to kind of be comfortable. Again, remember your pots, you want them to be in full sun for 6+ hours. You want to use a good quality commercial potting soil. Fertilizer may need to be applied during the summer, especially when it's getting to be really, really hot and the plant has kind of grown into the container. When it does that, it's soaking up a lot of nutrients out of the soil because there's so many roots. So sometimes a little fertilizer is needed for container plantings. You'll see that with like your hanging baskets or your potted up annual pots and things, like those will start to kind of struggle and they just need a little bit of fertilizer. Again, high water use, but you want the soil to dry out. So just making sure that, like in the summer, you may need to water twice a day, but you want that soil to be dry in between your waterings. So you can put herbs into the ground as well. You just want to really be conscious of those herbs that can kind of take over. So like your mints and your oreganos, and even like sometimes even lavenders can kind of start to spread in things. So you just want to kind of be conscious of that and just realize that if those are going to be put in there, you're going to be wanting to control them as best you can. This kind of a design is more of an informal design, right? So we have herbs just kind of popped into these beds. There's not really lines, there's not really any specific design. Well, I guess it's technically a design principle, but it's very informal. There's no lines, there's no rows and things. It's very much just like one here and one here and one here, right? Whereas a formal design, it's kind of planned out. They have them all in their own sections, and you can do whatever works best for you, right? So kind of cater it to yourself and have it just be as convenient for you and whatever works in your own landscape. And also be aware that there are some perennial herbs that will work in your garden. So lavender works really well, thyme. I also have chives on there. There's also, mints are perennials, but you want to be careful just where they spread so much. There's a few different perennials that actually will work. So if you want to have herbs in your garden, but then also still be able to use them, it can work, because herbs are really beautiful and they all, like lots of them have blossoms and they look really good. So just kind of be aware of that. So first is preparation. Adding organic matter is something that's very important. So if you're planting in the ground, if you're planting in a raised bed, you'll want to just make sure you have a really good soil that has a lot of nutrients and a lot of things in it. A good commercial blend, I think is what I said. If you're planting in the ground, you want to add a lot of organic matter, make sure that it gets mixed in, make sure that you have a lot of good drainage and airflow through your soil. So you want to break up the top 12 to 18 inches. And then as far as fertilization goes, when it's in the ground, it's not needed as much. Not really necessary, just because especially with adding the organic matter, you're getting a lot of nutrients and things from that. So next is the plantings. So you can do from seed or you can transplant. I know that some herbs take a lot longer to germinate. And so sometimes it's better to have the transplants and get the transplants from the nurseries. But if you start early with your own kind of little herb area in your yard, or not in your yard, in your home, you could start your own seeds and then transplant them yourself. So I'm gonna stop sharing because I want to show you all the little ones that I got. So I already showed you, this is sweet basil. And then I also got a Thai basil. I wanted to see the different, they both have a really different scent. They're really cool. We're going to talk about a lot of other different kinds of herbs as well. But I just wanted to show you the fun ones that I found. So then let's go to the sages next. So I found, this is called tangerine sage. It has a really interesting smell. It's kind of like soap, but with sage. It's really cool. I'm excited to kind of see how I can use this. And then I also found pineapple sage, which is one of my favorites. It has such a cool smell. So excited about that one. And then I got one of the tri-colored sages. So this ends up being like pinks, a little bit, purples, greens, and then like this white color. These are super cool. And they're perennials too, which is really cool. They work from zone 5 to 8. So this is something that we could plant into the ground after it's grown for this season. And then, let's see. I also got apple mint. They didn't have a ton of mint options, but apple mint is one of my favorites. It just has such a unique smell to it. It's just like a lot sweeter of a mint. And then I got chamomile, which I've never grown before, and I've never tried the tea, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to grow my own and then maybe try the chamomile tea grown from my own little herb area. And then I also got cilantro because I wanted to try. Oh yeah. And I also got rosemary as well. I wanted to try cooking with fresh rosemary. Rosemary is one of those herbs that doesn't taste super good to me. So I'm excited to try it to see. So those are some of the fun little herbs that I got, and we're going to be planting those in our little herb garden that we have. I'm excited to plant them. Let's see, where was I? Right here. Perfect. So those are transplants. They're ones that I'm pretty sure J&J grew these themselves. If not, then they would have ordered them from somewhere. Where I used to work, they would grow their own herbs and things, but so you can do it from seed. And then you just transplant them into your garden when they're big enough and when we're past kind of the freezing point. So as far as irrigation goes, drip irrigation is going to be best for your herb garden. There's a lot of benefits to using drip. We talk about it a lot in like your plant beds and vegetable gardens as well. And there's a lot of different benefits to it. It saves water, cutting down on the weeds, and it minimizes mold. So it kind of helps with that kind of overwatering problem that can happen with herbs. And then these are the two different kinds you could do, the inline drip and then the point source. We have both of these displayed at our learning garden. I don't know if we have it in our herb gardens, but we do have it in our vegetable, the like raised beds, where it shows how we use both the point source and the inline drip in our raised beds. So next is maintenance. Weeding is a must always, right? Unfortunately, weeding is something that you'll always be doing, especially early spring. But making sure to keep those weeds down, especially around your new little seedlings, is going to be, or either seedlings or transplants is going to be really good, because the weeds will compete with the new plants. Again, keeping the soil around the plant evenly moist, but you don't want it soaking and you want it to dry out in between. Deadheading and pinching back is something that helps the plant keep really bushy and really good looking. So harvesting your herbs is not like bad for the plant. It'll just kind of help it to continue to grow and kind of get a little bit more bushy and things. And then keeping an eye out for pests. There are some pests that will go after your herbs, making sure that they don't have spider mites and that they're not getting root rot from overwatering and things. Especially when you're buying them from the nurseries, you want to keep an eye out for these types of things so that you don't get them even before you plant them in the ground. So next we're going to talk about harvesting. So there are different types of herbs and things that you harvest and for different things. So there's the leaves, there's seeds, flowers, and roots. So the leaves, if you're harvesting the leaves, you can either pick the leaves or you harvest the entire stem. And usually with like the ones that you are harvesting for the leaves, you can usually take up to 75% of the growth at one time. You do want to wait until it's bigger for that, of course. But it can be done and it'll just kind of regrow and keep going. As far as seeds go, you want to remove either the seeds or the seed pods. Sometimes they'll have little like pods that are full of seeds, right? If it's a flower, you just kind of do it as if you were deadheading. And then roots, you take like the plant, like the entire plant, you kind of dig from the soil, you dig it up. And we'll go a little bit more into specifics with harvesting certain things. So those are like the hows you harvest, and now the whens we'll talk a little bit. So with the leaves, you want to harvest before the plant flowers. So you can even like harvest it when it's close to flowering. They say that that's the best time to do it because that's when the oils are at their peak. So it's when like the taste is going to be the most pungent. So with seeds, you want to wait until the seed or seed pods have changed from green to brown. That's how you know that they've kind of dried out. The flower, you want to harvest just before it fully blooms. So not when it's like completely open, but when it's like still a little bit closed. And then the roots, you harvest in the fall after the foliage has started dying back and drying out. So the roots are a little bit like a tulip bulb. We are seeing the tulips right now. They're really beautiful, but the leaves in some of them are starting to get wilty and looking kind of nasty. When they start to look like really nasty and starting to kind of fall over and things, that's when you know bulb is done. And with like your ginger or your garlic, that's how you know, okay, time to harvest. So just kind of keep that in mind. So as far as preparation for later use, there's actually a few ways to do this. And some of them it was pretty fun to learn about for me. So first, you can freeze them. And I've seen like videos of this, like doing it in an ice cube tray and things, which I think is pretty cool. First thing you'd want to do is make sure to rinse the herbs in cold water. And then you can either chop the herb up, or if it has like big leaves and that's the way you want to have it be, then you can keep it in the big leaves, but otherwise you can chop it up coarsely. And then you can do it in the ice cube tray, right? So you just place the chopped herbs into the ice cube tray, and then you can fill the tray with either water or oil. It depends on how you want to use it. So if you are going to be melting oil down to cook like a meat or something and you have the herb in there, do oil. Or if you're planning on doing it more like maybe in a tea or something, then you can just have it in water. Just kind of keep in mind how you're wanting to use those herbs. And then you can also do it on a sheet tray, which you have the chopped herbs and you spread them onto a cookie tray, and then you freeze the entire tray. And then afterwards, you pour those frozen herbs into a bag, either like a Ziploc bag, or you can do like a rigid container that's airtight. Doing it in the Ziploc bags can like crunch them a little bit. So having the airtight container is a little bit safer if you want to keep the herbs looking really nice. And then you can dry them. So again, rinsing the herbs, and you want to shake off the excess water as much as you can, not like going crazy, but kind of just shaking them off. Whew, excuse me. You want to get as much of the water off of there as possible. So spreading them out on dry paper towels or dishcloths, and you want to wait until all the surface moisture has evaporated. And then you want to take off anything that's dead or dying or damaged, anything that doesn't look good. And then with seeds, so after you've done all that, you want to put the seeds in a bag, a paper bag, or any kind of bag that has good air circulation with holes in it, so the air can kind of get in, continue drying that seed out. And then when the seed is all dried and things, you can hang that bag in a dark area with good air circulation. And then they can be stored in rigid light-proof containers. You don't want any light getting to the seeds. You just want them to kind of stay in their little area and stay seeds and not grow into anything else if you're wanting to use the seeds for cooking, right? Or there's the hanging method. So this is more for your leafy plants, where you kind of bunch them up and then you can tie string around them and hang them from, like this one's a fence post, this one at the bottom, they've hung their flowers up on like it looks like a coat hanger sort of. There was a lady in my hometown, she would hang her herbs up in the kitchen. She said that they would dry out faster, and that always made the kitchen smell really nice. So you do just want to make sure that they're hung upside down, and make sure it's good air circulation, and then make sure it's indoors and out of the sun, because sometimes the sun can bleach things or even burn the leaf tips. So then there's also a spreading method, which you can like pick individual leaves or petals off and things, and you spread them out on a window screen, a wire rack, or an herb drying rack. The herb drying rack is shown in the second picture, and it's kind of like a mesh. It just is like a way to get really good air circulation around and to kind of dry them as they are. You want them to be in an airy, warm, and dry area, and again, indoors and out of the sun. Next, there's the microwave method, which I would be really careful with this one. It's a quick method for drying small amounts of herbs. You just have to be careful with the herbs you use. So your herbs with kind of like the thicker flesh, they don't work as well, just because there's so much to dry on them. But like small leaves like basil, this would work. So you lay a single layer of herbs between paper towels, and then you place in the microwave for 1 to 2 minutes on high. You want to let the leaves cool down before checking for brittleness. If they like kind of crunch at your touch, then they're ready to go. But if they're still flexible, you want to reheat them in the microwave. Just be really careful again with the timing. You don't want anything catching on fire and getting ruined. So next, the conventional oven method. So this is like similar to the microwave, except for you put it on a cookie sheet, but you spread them out. And then you set the oven to the lowest setting. And again, when the leaves are brittle, excuse me. Don't know why I'm yawning so much. When the leaves are brittle, that means that they're done. And again, herbs with thicker leaves will probably need to be either air dried for a couple days beforehand, before you use the microwave, before you are try pressing them or doing the oven even. So other methods, you can use a dehydrating machine, food dryers, or even pressing. Those are things that people do. But again, you want to make sure that your really thick ones have been allowed to air dry for a bit before you do those ones. So next is storing. It's best if your herbs are stored in airtight containers. And also if they're made that no light can get into them is actually the best. It's fine if they're stored in clear containers. It's just the potency of the flavor will go away faster. And if it's in the freezer, it's best if you use the herbs within 9 months to a year of when you put them in there. So just kind of keep that in mind. So as far as using your herbs, we've kind of talked about this, but there are many different ways that you can use them. Like for example, you can put chives on your eggs. I've used fresh basil to make tomato basil soup. I had a girl in college once make lavender lemon bars. I didn't love them, but some people really like the taste of lavender. There's like teas that you can make. Even doing bath bombs with some of them might be fun. Different desserts. I've always wanted to try making brownies with like fresh mint to kind of see what that would taste like. So there's a ton of different ways that we use herbs, right? And you use your fresh herbs similar to the way that you use your dried herbs. So now I'm going to go through some lists of my favorites and then some other popular types of herbs. So basil, I've talked a little bit about basil. This is one of my favorites just because the taste of it being fresh is just so different than like the dried or anything. It's just such a richer, it's almost like sweet taste. It's really interesting. And there's actually a few really cool ones. So I showed you the sweet basil and the Thai basil. There's also this purple basil that's super cool. It stays a little bit more purple if you keep it more in a shaded area, but it has those purple leaves and it's edible. Like you can put it on pizza, you can put it in your soups. Like it's cool and it's different. Some things about basil. It is an annual, so it won't come back year to year. As far as maintenance goes, these ones can flower, especially when it starts to get hot. So you don't want to let it flower. You always want to cut that flower off. Continuous harvesting will help increase the leaf production. And then another thing about basil is it's really tender. So once your temperatures would go below 55 degrees or colder, they will get shocked a little bit. I remember so I used to work at a nursery And last year we had basil in our little garden, and we had one colder night, and I came to work and they were all dead. It was very sad, but all the basil just struggled because it just does not do well in the lower temperatures. So as far as harvesting goes with basil, you just cut the stems at the top of the plant where the leaves are, and then you use that. You can put the entire stem if you're like, if, for example, when I make soup, you just put the entire stem into it. You can like pick the leaves off the stem, but the stem is pretty soft. So when I make tomato basil soup, I end up blending everything together. So it kind of just blends the stem up into it. You can take off the leaves off of the stem if you're putting it in salads, if you're making pesto. Pesto, you kind of blend everything together too, so you can put the stem in there. If you're using them to like put on pizza, I'd probably just do the leaves. And then fun fact about basil, there's a holy basil called Tulsi. It's sacred in Hindi religious tradition. So that's another cool thing about a lot of herbs is they either have like a history behind them, or there's just like always something like really interesting that you can learn about herbs. It's things that like, herbs have been around for a long time. So they're really interesting plant genre, sort of. So next is thyme. This again is one of my favorites, and the freshness of thyme versus your dried thyme, there is such a difference. These ones are perennial to zone of 5. They don't get to be very tall. They're more of like a ground cover. You don't want to let these go to flower if you're using them for your culinary herbs. You don't want to overwater them either. These are more drought tolerant. They do kind of start to get a little bit of a woody growth, so you might need to replace them every few years to take out that woody growth. And it may need extra protection in the winter if it's in a container. If you put anything in a container, it raises the zone that it can survive in by like, I think it's 2 zones. So having it above ground. When it's in the ground, it's at the zone that it's at. But once you bring it above ground, it's in a more vulnerable place. So the zone goes up. As far as harvesting goes, you can cut the stems from either the base of the plant or the top of the plant. You kind of can just cut it wherever you're going to need it from. And it's really good for using in meat and vegetable dishes. Thyme is a really nice kind of subtle flavor. It doesn't get to be really strong easily. It has a really nice flavor to it. Next are chives, and I mostly like chives.
At the end?
Yes.
Just one quick thing on thyme that people might want to know is that there's the ornamental thyme. A lot of people use that as a ground cover. There's lemon thyme, there's all those, and the different varieties like woolly thyme. All of those are part of this family, and they're all edible. They're going to taste different. You know, the mother of thyme, kind of the main thyme, is that little bit taller plant. Just so people aren't confused of like, wait a minute, my thyme is really low and it flowers and it's really pretty. I use it as a ground cover. Well, yeah, you can. And you can even eat that. It's just going to be different.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That I should have pointed that out. But yeah, thyme is a really popular ground cover, and they do have really nice flowers. And so maybe you'll experiment next time. You'll kind of get some thyme from your ground cover and see what it tastes like. But yeah, thanks for adding that, Dave. So with chives, I don't necessarily love the taste of them, but I love how they look when they flower. So that's why I have them on here, even though you don't want it to flower because it kind of changes the taste and things. But chives are really popular. I had a friend where at the nursery I used to work at, she'd just go out and pick chives and just eat them by the stem. And I was like, you are so funny. But they are a really good garnish for a lot of things. So, and it's a fun one too, because it's best used as a garnish because the taste will be a little bit more pungent than if you were to put it in when you're cooking. The taste kind of gets a little bit more dulled. And with chives, they are bulbs, so they might need to be divided at the end of the season. So these ones are perennials also. And And then with harvesting, you just kind of snip the leaves as it's needed. It's good if it's mixed into cheeses and salads. The flowers are edible too. So if you just like can't control the flowers and it just ends up flowering, you can actually eat the flowers. They can be used as a garnish and things if you want something to look pretty. Again, they're gonna taste like kind of onionish. So don't like put them on a cake, but maybe garnishing a salad to make it look extra pretty or something. They're better if stored, if they're like mixed into oil or butter and frozen than if you were to dry them, because the taste isn't as strong if you dry them. So lavender is one of my favorites. Funny story, I harvested a bunch of lavender and I kept it and dried it, and it was all awesome and dried. And I was like, I'm gonna put this in my baths and make bath bombs and whatever. And I never did. They just sat dried in my room. And the cool thing about them is that they stayed looking really beautiful and purple, and like they looked really good. And so they're a great dried flower. And these can be divided in the fall. If it's in a container, again, it needs to be probably covered to protect it from the winter kill. So most of the herbs, if they're in a container, you probably would have to protect them a little bit more. As far as harvesting goes, I didn't type it on here, but pretty easy. You want to wait until the fall after the blooms have kind of not died, but they kind of turn into these just little pods. And then you can cut them off in the fall. And you don't want to cut into the woody growth of any lavenders, because they do have more of like a woody stem at the bottom. But then on the top, it's kind of like it's just a little stem. So you just want to cut to the woody growth, not into it. And then you can either add them to desserts, good for bath bombs, with like Epsom salts, adding them into the water with that can be really nice. But again, just even as like a dried flower, it's really beautiful. Oh, and then, so one thing about this is actually a pretty popular perennial that you'll see in people's yards. And you can have it in there, and it works really well in our climate and things. So next are mints, which I love mints because there are so many different kinds. J&J didn't have a ton of different kinds. I was happy to find the apple mint, but there's even like chocolate mint, which it doesn't smell completely like chocolate, but it does kind of have that chocolatey smell. Not completely, but it's really interesting. I love chocolate mint. And then peppermint and spearmint are just like your kind of classics. But there's just so many different kinds, and they're just fun. I've always wanted to try like a mint tea with fresh mint, and I've never done it. I'm just not a huge tea person, but I'm gonna maybe try this year, or even try to make them into desserts and things, or even like a bath bomb, or even sprinkle them just in the bath. Because like peppermint is really good for certain things with like, I can't remember all of them, but peppermint's really good with health benefits and things. Again, it's best if it's grown in a container because mint is extremely invasive. With harvesting these, you could just kind of take the leaves off as needed throughout the season, and then especially at the end of the season, making sure to get it all before it goes. So then next are sages. Sages are cool because not only do they have fun smells, but they have ones that look really cool. And so last year I got like fresh sage from the little gardens that we had for our turkey for Thanksgiving. My mom, she says that it gives the turkey such a better taste if the sage is fresh sage that's been dried. So we did that last year. It was kind of fun. But yeah, I showed you the one that we got, but they have like the cool tricolor one, the pineapple one, but even like the common one is really pretty. It looks a little bit like lamb's ear. They're kind of cool. I like sage. It does really well, and it looks nice too. The common sage and the tricolor sage, those are the perennials. Other sages are annuals. So like the pineapple sage that I showed you and the tangerine sage, those are both annuals. So they're not going to live through the winter. As far as maintenance, again, just not overwatering. And then these are good for stuffing, sausages, stews, and they can be used fresh or dried is what's best for them. So next is oregano. I love oregano because of the smell. It just has such a really pungent smell to it. It does take over if it's in your beds. So this is another one. You probably want to have it in the container. It is perennial also. And it's more of like a ground cover type of a thing. Like oregano is really good in Italian recipes. And fun fact that I found out about oregano is that there's more than 44 species of it, which is crazy. And it's a chemical in oregano that makes it taste the way it tastes. And it's found in other plants as well, but it's this carvacrol. I think I said that correct. It's used to treat colds, coughs, stomach problems, other conditions. So it just has a lot of cool uses. This is a funny story about oregano. My voice teacher, she's really into like essential oils. So when I was in high school, I got a super bad sore throat. And she made me drink water with oregano oil in it and was like, this will help you. You'll be fine. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever drank in my life. And I still had a sore throat. So I don't know how much good it did me there. But she said that it would help. I don't know. It probably helps her, but I don't know. Funny. So those are some of my favorites. And then some other popular ones that people also grow. So there's marjoram, which is similar to oregano. It's just like a little bit more of a subtle taste, I've heard. It's in the same family. Never grown it, but it's similar to oregano, but it's an annual as well. You want to harvest the leaves before the flower buds open. Again, we've talked about with the oils. And to keep them from flowering, you want to harvest or pinch back at least a third in the spring. So you plant it, it starts to grow, and you want to pinch back a third or cut it. Pinching it back just means like if I were to have my plant here and I just take my fingers and I just kind of pinch a little bit. The little stems are tender enough that you can pinch them just with your fingernails. If you're not harvesting regularly, it's something that you might have to cut it back to make it be a little bit more compact and to keep it from turning woody. Good dried or used fresh, good for Italian recipe. It's a little bit more sweeter and more mild than oregano. So next is cilantro. And this is what I'm excited to try because I do want to see if I like it better if it's fresh. We talked about how the plant will kind of start not doing well once the temps start to rise. So maybe it's the one that you put more in like a more shady area where it gets enough sunlight, but it's not during the hottest part of the day. And to prevent it from bolting, which is that's what happens when things flower. It's called bolting with herbs and with other vegetables like your lettuce and things. Those things will bolt as well. Once it starts bolting, you won't be able to stop it from bolting, but one way you can prevent it is just cutting the flowers off as soon as you see them. If you want more cilantro in the fall and it's kind of died back, you can replant it and it'll grow once the temperatures are a little bit cooler again. With the seeds, the coriander seeds, that's what comes from cilantro. Again, you just want to make sure that they're brown and then you dry them before using them all the way. Leaves are really good for salsa or really good in salsas and as like a garnish and things. The seeds are good for seasoning soups and salads, and it has a lot to do with dishes from like India or the Middle East and Asia. Lots of the recipes use coriander. So next one is parsley, and there's a couple of different kinds that I thought it was fun when I was looking them up, how they just look different. The curly kind is, I think, the one used most for just like a garnish. But then the flat leafed one is one that it's more used for culinary type of uses. So yeah, again, these ones are good for garnishes. They're good for flavoring meat. I use a little bit of parsley when I cook turkey, and it makes it taste really good. Some fun facts about them: they grow best in partial shade, and their leaves are high in nutrients, which is the vitamins A, B, and C, as well as iron, calcium, and magnesium. So parsley is actually really good for you, which I didn't know. All these fun facts. So next is rosemary. This one's an annual. Really good drainage is needed for this one. They're kind of similar to lavenders. They just don't stay alive like lavenders do here. As far as harvest goes, cutting the stems from the bottom of the plant, and then you use the stems. You can take the leaves off and use them. Rosemary is really good for seasoning breads, for seasoning meats, vegetables, cheeses, eggs, soups, salads. I don't really like it on anything and like Italian mixed in with other things, but I'm excited to see if I actually like rosemary with the fresh stuff, because I don't know what it is. It just like focaccia bread. I don't like focaccia just because of the rosemary. I don't know. It's weird. Some interesting history about rosemary is that it was used since early Greek and Roman times. It symbolizes remembrance and symbolized happiness. So usually they would have rosemary at funerals and then also at weddings. They would have these, either like the bride be wearing like a halo, or they'd have them as a bouquet, but they would have those. So next is garlic, and I've never grown garlic. There's a couple that live across from my grandparents that they are growing garlic right now, and they do it every year. So it grows really well here, but they like well-drained soils that are fertile. You don't want to plant them where it or other plants from the onion family were previously planted. So you want to kind of switch around the places. That's pretty much the same with anything in your vegetable garden. You kind of want to switch places, just because certain things either put stuff into the soil or they take it out. And then you want to plant the bulbs in the fall, like any other bulb, and then in the spring they'll shoot up, and then the leaves will start to die back. And once they start to die back, you know that it's time to harvest your bulbs. And you want to dig up the entire plant and then let the plant cure in an airy, shady, dry spot for 2 weeks. And then you can hang them upside down in bunches of 4 to 6 plants. And you need to have good air circulation. And then the bulbs, it's used for a lot of different things. I mean, I use this in a lot of different recipes. Garlic. I also say that garlic is good for, I think it's like your ears or something, from what I'm remembering. It's like you put like garlic oil in your ears and it helps with infection or something. I don't know. Don't go doing it because I said it, because I'm not certain that that is correct. Next is ginger. And ginger is an interesting thing. I find that I really like the smell of it, like when I'm grating the skin off of fresh stuff, but the powder smells super weird to me. It makes things taste amazing, which is so funny, because when I put the powder in stuff, I'm like, that smells so weird. But then it makes things taste amazing, but the fresh stuff smells super good. So it's a root. And so the leaves are going to get to be around 2 to 3 feet tall. So it'll be growing. And then again, you dig up the entire plant with the ginger root. It's best if it's harvested at 8 to 10 months old, which it might be hard to do that here because our growing season does not last for that long. But again, the roots are good for flavoring meat or desserts. It's used in a lot of Asian dishes, as well as like some of our desserts like gingerbread, and like I used it in carrot cake the other night. Next is dill. Dill's a really interesting plant. It's just kind of frilly and fuzzy looking. It's an annual. It can get up to be 2 to 4 feet tall, which I didn't know that. So that's pretty fun. You want the soil to get a little, it can dry a little bit. You don't want it to dry for super long periods of time, but again, with most herbs, you want it to dry out in between waterings. To have a continuous harvest, you want to sow the seeds every few weeks, and you don't want the plants to flower again, so you don't want it to bolt. When the plant has 4 to 5 leaves, you can start harvesting by pinching off the older leaves. So you'll just want to pinch the leaves that are the oldest ones, and that'll continue the harvest. Dill is good as garnishes for dishes. It's good for flavoring like chip dips. And then also if you have like your own cucumbers and your own dill, you can make dill pickles. So that's kind of fun. And then, so next are some things that are like sort of herbs, but not herbs. So the first one is Nasturtium, which I fell in love with this when I worked in Colorado. My one coworker, he took me out to the vegetable gardens, or the greenhouse, the vegetable greenhouse, and he was like, here, this flower is edible, eat it. And I was like, I'm not eating a flower. That's so weird. But he was like, it's fine. Like, they're edible. So he pops one in his mouth. So I was like, okay, like if he's going to eat it and he's fine. So popped it in my mouth, just chewing it. And then all of a sudden my entire mouth was on fire because the flowers taste like pepper, like black pepper. It's the weirdest thing, but it's cool because they can be used as like a salad garnish, where you just like put them on your salad, and then instead of doing black pepper, you have flowers. And they're cool too because they can be used in like, well, any herbs can be used in annual pots and things, but this one, it trails really good. And so it looks really nice as a trailing plant, kind of a ground cover type of a thing. You don't want to give it too much nitrogen, and then you can just take the flowers off as you need them. So it's not really like herb-ish type of a plant, but it's sort of, I don't know, they're kind of cool, which is why I put them in here. So next one is this pot marigold, which I learned about from the USU extension on herbs. The plant uses the flower petals, and they call it, it's like poor man's saffron, I think is what the name was, because it's not saffron, but the petals can be used as a substitute for saffron. And since saffron is such an expensive, I think it's technically a spice, this is a lot cheaper of a version of it. So you take off the flowers to harvest, and then you take off the petals, and then the petals is what you use as that saffron. It can be used fresh or it can be used dried. So this one was a cool one, and it's just like a pretty looking flower too. So next is scented geraniums, and there's a ton of different ones, which I didn't realize that there was all these different kinds. They all have different smells. The citrusum that has like a lemon smell, it helps in repelling mosquitoes and things, and it smells so good. It smells so good. This is the citrusum is one that you could have as a houseplant as well. When my friends had one, really cool. And they get like the little geranium looking flowers, but it's the leaves that they're mostly used for, and they can be used in teas and potpourris or little sachets. Yeah, these ones are cool. I want to get a citrusum at some point to put in my house. Next is lemongrass. This one also helps in warding off mosquitoes, because mosquitoes don't like that kind of citrusy smell. It is a biennial. The leaves, or no, this is not a biennial. Looks like I have the wrong information on here. This was from I don't know which one it was from, but this is an annual. I was like, biennial, that's not right. It's an annual here. It doesn't stay alive, but really cool. I haven't seen it used in any like thing else other than a mosquito like repellent, but it's cool, and it's a cool kind of grass to use that you can put in your annual pots. It's kind of like a spike type of looking thing. Next is catmint, and I guess technically this one could be classified as an herb because it's the leaves that you would harvest off of this, but it doesn't really do like much for us. It can be used as kind of like a catnip substitute for cats, especially the species of catmint. But it kind of has that smell of a mintiness to it. You've probably like even hummingbird mint kind of has that like minty type of a smell to it. The catmint can become invasive like the species. There are different varieties if you're using it as a perennial, because it is a perennial in our zone. There are varieties that don't take over as much and that cats tend to stay away from. So you just want to make sure that you're getting the right variety. But if you're getting it for the cats to come and for the cats to love, then you'll want to make sure to plant the species of it. It's similar to other mints. So just kind of taking the leaves as needed, and then you can cut it a third during the growing season, and then it'll continue to grow. Even with normal catmints, you can do that. Once the blooms stop, if you kind of cut them back, they'll kind of go off and bloom again. And then again, the dried leaves, you can put them in cat toys. See if your cats will like it. I don't know. I've always wanted to try it with my cat. I should do it this year. So next is chamomile, which I'm excited to try. There are two different kinds. So there's the Roman and the German, and I found that the Roman one is a perennial, but I don't know, like I didn't see it at J&J, so I don't know. But that's what it said in the article that I was reading. And then the German one is an annual. So the German one is the one that I have. This is the German chamomile. The Roman one's a little bit smaller, and the Roman one can also spread if it's planted in the ground. You just kind of take the flowers off as you need them, and then the use would not, I didn't change the use either. The use would be the flowers, right? And they be used in tea to make chamomile tea, which has a lot of health benefits. And so that's the end of my slides. I feel like I kind of just threw it all at everybody. Remember that this is being recorded, and we do have the PDF slides. So if you didn't like get any names down or anything, it is something that you can go back and look at.